this computer, share screen. And here we go. So we're going to start, actually, finally, working on book 6. Now, we noted the confrontation between the masculine and the feminine, and we would say, really, that the masculine is they are defined by battle and glory. And glory is won through conquest of others. So you can get that currency only when you kill other people. So that's glory. I mean, I guess it's glory from being king. Agamemnon as well. And the realm of the feminine, well, we saw that also, Helen. I mean, I think we can say that Homer is depicting what he sees to be a sick culture that is not advocating it. He's calling it into question. Masculine world of war, feminine world is defined by the home, by nurturing, by sustenance. Remember, Hera brings Athena in to intervene. She says, because I love and care about them both. And it comes as such a shock when you're reading the rest of the book, because there isn't very little love in the Iliad at all. The Odyssey will be different. That will require a different kind of attention. Meaning, as we'll see, women have zero place in the Iliad. But in the Odyssey, I mean, not that they have zero, they get good lines, Helen gets good stuff, but their world is completely destroyed. In the Odyssey is focused not on death, like in the Iliad, but on marriage, Penelope and Odysseus in some ways, because when Odysseus travels back from Troy, he goes back to Ithaca, his island, and his wife Penelope has been waiting for him for 20 years. They have a complicated relationship, but that is a story with a happy ending, as it were, or even a comic ending. And when I say comedy, what I mean is something that is, it's not like the ha-ha of comedy. Comedy is defined by its happy ending. I thought it wasn't going to work out. Oh, it worked out, right? Romantic comedy, right? Romantic comedy is not just the ha-ha aspect of it. It's the form. And the form of comedy comes from Odysseus. He starts in one place. He goes to another place, which is really bad, that he's trying to get home. He's doing that for a long time. And then he gets back to this first place. But the first place is different. It's a kind of return to a place you've never been to before. But you see that comedy has a kind of shape with that happy ending. Tragedy shape is down, 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 right? And that's we know from the very first line of the poem, and Zeus's will was working towards its end. Okay, here we go. So we talked about what Hector's hesitations are. Let's pick it up from here, 525. But I would die of shame, we read this before, I know, to face the men of Troy and the Trojan women trailing their long robes if I would shrink from battle now a coward. Oh, wait, so we stopped at this, right? So here, women trailing their long robes if I would shrink from battle now, that's shame, right? Glory and shame, we said, are opposite. Nor does the spirit urge me on that way. Interesting. It would be really interesting to look at how spirit gets repeated throughout the Iliad. If you did that, you would find something interesting. Nor does the spirit urge me on that way. We saw Achilles has that spirit, Hector also, that we've gone from the lines that preceded, if I would shrink from battle now a coward, the next line, nor does the spirit urge me on that way, is a transition from something that is external to the internal. Meaning even if everybody said the opposite, even if everybody told me to do whatever Hector is saying, I was born into this. This is what I want. I mean, it's a little bit ambivalent. On the one hand, you know what ambivalent means? Ambiguous. It's not really 100% clear. That's also something we're not afraid of things not being clear. We're happy when things are not clear, because when things are not clear, we learn more. Because lack of clarity is telling you that what you thought you were able to know, you don't actually know. Right? And you'll have to try harder. So let's try again. If you would shrink from battle now, a coward, that's the external. Nor does the spirit urge me on that way. That's the internal. Then he goes back to, I've learned it all too well. I mean, you may see the way in which that last line, I've learned it all too well, qualifies what came before. Nor does the spirit urge me on that way. Meaning we thought it was internal, but now we see that Hector's inner life is determined by what he's already learned, what other people have told him. Tells you a little bit about the Trojans. And I think you'll see that this will make sense given how we continue reading. To stand up bravely, always to fight in the front ranks of Trojan soldiers, winning my father great glory, glory for myself. Why does he mention his father? Because this is a patriarchal culture, right? And what does that mean here? That the glory of sons and fathers are connected. That if the son wins glory, that currency somehow goes backwards as well. I mean, I guess it gives back as well, because when the father gets glory, the son gets more glory. For in my heart and soul, I also know this well. The days will come when sacred Troy must die, Priam must die, and all his people with him. Priam, who hurls the strong ash spear. Hector is not looking forward to a happy ending here, right? Then, even so, we might want to, if we're in our movie version of the Iliad, we might want to have a close-up on Hector here, because he seems now, I think, we'll see, if he seems to be turning a little bit to an inner world again. Even so, it is less the pain of the Trojans still to come that weighs me down, not even of Hecuba herself or King Priam, or the thought that my own brothers in all their numbers, all their gallant courage may tumble in the dust, crushed by enemies. Really get a very strong sense of, at first it looks like Hector's just reeling off stuff. But then at the end, all their gallant courage may tumble in the dust, crushed by enemies. So you start to visualize this. But then he continues, that is nothing beside your agony. Who's the your here? Good, Andromache. When let's actually watch, like, this whole scene is Hector and Andromache trying to negotiate, like, what's going to happen in their future. And here it seems like Hector is trying to cheer her up a little bit. And let's talk about the way he thinks of cheering him up, her up. That is nothing, all that I just mentioned, nothing beside your agony. When some brazen Argyle Greek hails you off in tears, wenching away your day of light and freedom. Oh, that's going to cheer her up. But then he just keeps on going. Then far off in the land of Argos you must live, laboring at a loom. Everybody who doesn't know what a loom is has to Google loom. I'm not doing it now. And you'll see and get a picture. And this is another thing that came through in our meetings. Guys, you have to Google stuff. I'm not going to tell you everything. And you have to read things. You know what? If you don't read things, you're going to fail. If you do read things, you'll do very well. Right? It's that simple. So you're not going to get by like taking notes and being half present. Not going to work that way. To cheer you up. Then far off in the land of Argos you must live, laboring at a loom at another woman's beck and call, fetching water at some spring, Maces or Hyperia, resisting it all the way. I mean, we can see her now being torn by another woman's slaves, right? the rough yoke of necessity at your neck. It's like, Hector, can you stop now? No. And a man may say, who sees you streaming tears, it's not only that bad. What's worse is they're going to caption you. What's the caption going to be? There is the wife of Hector, the bravest fighter they could field, those stallion-breaking Trojans, long ago when the men fought for Troy. So this guy is going to see his wife, Andromache, and say, you know who that is? 550. So he will say, and the fresh grief will swell your heart once more. So not only is it going to be bad when I die now, and for all the times that I'm dead, but it's going to come again because people will shame you. So he will say, and the fresh grief will swell your heart once more, widowed, robbed of the one man strong enough to fight off your day of slavery. No, no, let the earth come piling over my dead body. Before I hear your cries, I hear you dragged away. Wow, that's weird, isn't it? Right? So that he's present to it himself. He gives this scene. He says this other guy is going to have you as a slave. And going to drag you around. And then Hector seems to be speaking from the first person, like looking on himself. No, no, let the earth come piling over my dead body. Before I hear your cries, I hear you dragged away. So it's weird. He really goes there. Not only does he put her in that terrible vision, but he also himself sees that vision. A very clear sense of his fate, which will make what we talked about last time, the cognitive dissonance of this scene so striking. Let's keep on reading. In the same breath, shining Hector, like Achilles, reached down for his son, but the boy recoiled, cringing against his nurse's full breast. Oh, we did read this before, right? Let's read it again. Streaming out at the sight of his own father, because it's not really his father there. He is a good father, but he's not dressed like his father. Terrified by the flashing bronze, the horsehair crest, the great ridge of the helmet nodding, bristling terror. So it struck his eyes. Wow, we're looking a lot of times watching people seeing things. Before Hector seeing that scene, now we're watching Hector's son seeing Hector, and so it struck his eyes. Whenever you see that kind of thing, you know that the author wants you to think about reading, perception. So it struck his eyes. I'm watching it. Also, relationship. We'd have to think a lot more about this particular or any of these examples, but we'll see more and more of this kind of thing, and we'll discuss it. And his loving father laughed, his mother laughed as well, and glorious Hector, quickly lifting the helmet from his head, set it down on the ground, fiery in the sunlight. And raising his son, he kissed him, tossed him in his arms, right? All of a sudden, it's like a Hallmark card special, right? Heck, the father coming home and lifting the boy in his arms. Lifting a prayer to Zeus and the other deathless gods, Zeus, all you immortals, grant this boy my son may be like me. First in glory among the Trojans, strong and brave like me, and rule all Troy in power, and one day let them say, he is a better man than his father. When he comes home from battle, bearing the bloody gear of the mortal enemy he has killed in war, a joy to his mother's heart. Remember what Svi said last time, or somebody said, what is cognitive dissonance? It's believing two things at the same time. It's not only that. I mean, it's believing two things that don't go together at the same time. So the cognitive dissonance is, what? Or didn't he just before give us the Technicolor 360-degree version of the fate of Troy and his family, at least, and Troy, I think, as well, right? So, and he just did that. And now he says it's the boy's bar mitzvah, the Jewish ritual. And so I guess it's more, if he's whatever, he's younger, whatever. But we're giving the kid a blessing. What's the blessing? Maybe like me, first in glory among the Trojans, strong and brave like me. But we know that's not going to happen. Or rule all Troy in power. One day let them say he's a better man than his father. It's like total fantasy land, right? It's interesting that in this time of great stress and sense of doom, he knows that that when he comes from a battle bearing the bloody gear of the mortal enemy, is killed in war, joy to his mother's heart. Even though he knows what's going to happen in the future, he still cannot get out of this Trojan frame of mind. Right? You know what I mean by that? Before, when it's Hector said, I learned it well. This is what Trojans do. Oh, I was saying before that at a time of not only stress, but desperation, that just the reliance on fantasy. I think, right? It's just bizarre. Well, let's see how she reacts. So Hector prayed and placed his son in the arms of his loving wife. Andromache pressed the child to her scented breast, smiling through her tears. Knowing what we know so far about the Iliad makes these lines so significant, right? Here he's placing his son in the arms of his loving wife. So the masculine and the feminine are present to each other in a loving manner. Andromache pressed the child to her scented breast. Before, it was the nurse. So they're similar scenes. They're both scenes of nourishment, but this is a scene of family, of love and responsibility. I mean, I don't know how responsible Hector is, but it's at least of love. Andromache pressed the child to her scented breast, smiling through her tears. Why is she crying? I mean, in a way, she knows it's just a charade. I may be right, because she knows this is just guy talk. Her husband noticed and filled with pity now. You can see that, like, I'm not saying women are represented well in the Iliad, but guys not so good either. I mean, as we said, there is a patriarchal relationship. The masculine defines the feminine, but the masculine is pretty dysfunctional. But here, together, her husband noticed, and filled with pity now, Hector stroked her gently, trying to reassure her, repeating her name, Andromache, dear one. Why so desperate? Why so much grief for me? No man will hurl me down to death against my fate. I read that like Hamlet, right? Meaning I give a lot of emphasis. Why did I do that? Why so much grief for me? No man will hurl me down to death against my fate. Hector believes in fate, right? So the two things kind of contradict one another. The first thing is a way of trying to cheer her up, himself up. It is his fate to die in Troy. And fate, no one alive has ever escaped it. Neither brave man nor coward, I tell you. It's born with us the day that we are born. One good question is, when do literary characters begin to make what we would consider to be free choices? Where do we see that happening first? Not here. I mean, not in this part. So please go home and tend to, I do this, right? I ask questions, I don't answer them, we'll come back to them, right? Keep track of them. Wow. I often say that I'm going to give extra credit, and I don't ever define what the extra credit is. So extra credit could mean any number of different things, and not necessarily, and almost always never, giving you a higher grade. However, this is an extra credit where I would take into consideration if somebody would keep track of all of the questions that I ask that we're not answering right away. So then at the end, wow, that would be great, right? Then at the end, we could go over them. What a great idea. As for the fighting, so what did he say? So please go home and tend to your own tasks. It's very clear here, right? We were together, that's over. You do what you were born to do. The distaff in the loom, Google them, it's sewing, and keep the women who are working hard as well. As for the fighting, here we have men, the women sew and men fight. Men will see to that, all who are born in Troy, but I most of all, heroic Hector. Hector, of flash and arms, took up his horsehair crested helmet once again, and his loving wife went home, turning, glancing back again and again, and weeping live, warm tears. That again and again is good, right? You hear it, like you can hear her crying back again and again, and weeping live, warm tears. You see, translators not only give meaning, they also want to give ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. They want us to feel it, right? She quickly reached the sturdy house of Hector, man killing Hector, and found her women gathered there inside, and stirred them all to a high pitch of mourning. Right? Weird, right? She's already in mourning. So in his house, they raised the dirges for the dead, for Hector still alive. His people were so convinced that never again would he come home from battle, never escape the Argives' rage and bloody hands. So both Andromache and Hector, they both know it's their fate. I mean, and Hector's kind of living out his fate. He must do what he has to do. Does that mean he's like programmed by God? No, but his nature, no. But his nature is such that he must follow his nature. I guess the question will be, is at what point does some character go against their nature? That's a good question. Anyway, so we saw the two images here, and we'll conclude this part right now. The two images here of the child, mother, and father together as a unit, the child nursing. And then at the end, right, you see this is really what defines the tragedy of the Iliad. The tragedy of the Iliad is these worlds are apart and they stay apart. You do the sewing, we'll do the fighting. And it's really the destruction of Troy is the destruction of that relationship. And we see that with Hector saying bye. Okay, that is lecture number 2.